The first sound was my wedding ring skittering across a Formica countertop like a coin that didn't want to land. Not because I threw it. Because my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't hold on to anything. Not my coffee mug, not my dignity, not the version of my life that still made sense. I was standing in a fluorescent-lit break room on the 7th floor of a building that smells like printer toner and lemon disinfectant. Someone had taped a Be Kind poster above the microwave. The irony was so sharp it almost felt intentional. Across from me were two people who had rehearsed this moment without me. My wife, hair perfect, posture perfect, face wearing that calm, professional mask she uses when she's about to win an argument. And the man beside her, leaning against the sink like he belonged there, like I was the unexpected visitor in their scene. I'm not going to tell you their names. Not because I'm protecting them. Because if I put their names on the internet, I'll start sounding like I'm telling a story instead of confessing a humiliation. Also, I'm the kind of guy who apologizes when someone bumps into me. That's the kind of too soft we're working with here. I had come to her office because she texted me. Can you stop by? Need you for something important. I thought important meant a flat tire, a bad day, a lost key, a hug, something married people do. What it meant was witness. She didn't ease into it. She didn't pull me aside. She didn't even pretend she was nervous. She waited until I walked in and saw him, then gestured to the table like she was presenting a slideshow. Okay, she said, and smiled like this was efficiency, not cruelty. We need to clear the air. My stomach did that slow drop. The one you get when you realize you've been the only person not reading the room for months. He nodded at me. Not a greeting. More like approval. Like I was a student arriving for an exam he'd already graded. And then my wife said it. Not yelling. Not crying. Just clean. I told him you were too soft, she said, like she was describing a sweater that didn't fit right. The man next to her gave a little laugh. Quiet, controlled, like he'd already heard the line and liked it enough to hear it again. I stood there, holding a bag of bagels I'd brought because I'm apparently an unpaid supporting character in my own marriage. And my brain did something pathetic. It started searching for the least embarrassing explanation. Maybe she means soft like emotional. Maybe she means I'm gentle. Maybe this is about boundaries. Maybe this is some weird motivational thing. Then she kept going. You don't challenge me, she said. You don't push. You just accommodate. You apologize for existing. You make everything easy. She looked at him, then back at me, and he said that's exactly the problem. He didn't deny it. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't even look surprised. He just said, she needs someone who can keep up. If you've ever felt your self-respect try to leave your body, you know the sensation. Like your spine wants to unzip itself and crawl away. I tried to speak. I genuinely tried. But all that came out was this small, ugly sound. Not a word. More like a leak. My wife's expression tightened. Annoyance, not regret. And that's when I realized I wasn't there for a conversation. I was there for a verdict. Here's the part one hate admitting. I'd already been swallowing little humiliations for a long time. The way she'd started taking phone calls in the bathroom with the fan on. The sudden obsession with being around people with ambition. The way she began saying, I'm just wired differently than you. As if that excused every sharp edge. The way she'd ask my opinion and then smile at me like I'd handed her a child's drawing. I kept telling myself it was stress, work, life, anything but the obvious. Because the obvious would mean I'd been wrong about my own marriage, and I don't handle being wrong well. I handle it the way soft men handle everything. I absorb it. In that break room, under that stupid Be Kind poster, my hands went cold. My face went hot. My heart started hammering like it was trying to escape first. My ring that had been snug for years, suddenly felt like it was choking my finger. So I did the only thing my body could think to do. I pulled it off. Not with drama. Not with a speech. Just slid it over my knuckle like removing a bandage that's been stuck too long. I set it on the table between them. It made that tiny metallic sound, tink, and it felt louder than the office around us. I looked at my wife. Then I looked at him. And I heard my own voice come out steadier than I deserved. Good news. Now you can compare properly. For a fraction of a second, her eyes widened, like she didn't expect me to do anything that wasn't compliance. Then she recovered. Of course she did. And she said something that still makes my ears burn when I remember it. Don't be dramatic, she muttered. Dramatic. As if removing my ring in front of the man she'd been auditioning was some theatrical flourish, not a man quietly bleeding out. I picked up the bagels. Yes, I took the bagels, because I am apparently a cartoon, and walked out. I got into the elevator with two strangers who smelled like cologne and confidence. I stared at the floor numbers lighting up and tried to breathe like a normal person. When I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. A message from my wife. Not "I'm sorry." Not "please." Not even "we need to talk." It was, "You left your ring." I stood there under the building's security camera, holding a bag of bagels and a life that had just been demoted to logistics. And then I got the second buzz. A notification from our shared cloud photo album. A new folder had been created. The folder name was a date, tomorrow's date, and a word that didn't belong in any marriage. Trial. That's when my knees went weak. Because whatever this was, it wasn't spontaneous. It was scheduled, and I was the only person who hadn't been invited until the moment they needed an audience. I walked out into the street, blinking like I'd just surfaced from underwater. And I realized something that made me feel both sick and stupid. The ring wasn't the first thing she'd set down on a table. It was just the first thing she let me see. And that's where I'll stop part one, because the next part is where I open that folder and learn what "compare properly" was really supposed to mean. When I got back to my car, I sat in the driver's seat for at least 20 minutes before I remembered the keys were still in my jacket pocket. I didn't start the engine. I didn't move. I just stared at the phone screen like it was a cursed object. That folder, trial. A stupid name for something that felt so orchestrated, so cold. It could have been a legal deposition. Eventually, curiosity shoved shame out of the way. I tapped the notification and opened the cloud album we'd shared since 2018. It used to be full of the usual stuff: weekend hikes, blurry concert videos, our cat trying to kill a laser pointer. I hadn't checked it in months. Maybe longer. The trial folder had 4 items inside. The first was a selfie. Francis and him. Taken in a mirror, low lighting. She was wearing my hoodie. No, our hoodie. The gray one she used to steal on rainy days. She looked different in it now. Posed, performative. Like someone trying on an old version of herself just to prove it never fit right. The second item was a screenshot of a calendar. A shared calendar I didn't have access to. Thursday, 7 p.m., was labeled dinner, test chemistry. Test chemistry. I don't know if that was supposed to be a joke or an honest description of what my wife had turned our marriage into, a science experiment. The third item was a photo of a napkin. Scribbled handwriting. His. I recognized it from an old birthday card. "You're ready for a life that doesn't tiptoe around you." That's what he'd written. I stared at it, so long my vision blurred. But the last item? That one hit different. It was a video. I should have stopped there. Closed the app. Blocked her. Blocked him. Called a friend. Screamed. Anything. But no. I watched it. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The video was grainy, recorded in low light, angled weirdly like someone had set a phone down without checking the frame. But I recognized the corner of the couch. Our couch. My couch. Frances was in the shot, not saying anything. Just sitting, waiting. Her body language was relaxed, almost bored, like she was waiting for takeout. Then his voice, off camera. "Do you think he'll figure it out?" Her voice, "No. Milo doesn't ask questions. He just makes tea." They both laughed. I paused it there. Couldn't watch the rest. I didn't need to. That sentence was enough to shatter something. I think it's wild how betrayal isn't one big fire. It's slow. A quiet gas leak you only smell once the house is already full. You strike a match thinking it's just a candle, and suddenly your world is ash. She told him I was too soft. She laughed about my tea, and they both thought I was too dull to notice. I closed the app, started the car, drove 3 blocks before pulling into an empty lot and throwing up into a storm drain. Then I drove home, slowly, calmly, like nothing had happened. Because if they wanted a comparison, I was going to show them the real difference. I didn't sleep that night, not even an hour. I just lay there in the guest room staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the hallway clock ticking like it was mocking me. Every second felt like a dare. Tick, tick, tick. "How long until you break, Milo?" Frances hadn't come home. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I think part of me wanted to see how far she'd go if I said nothing. I wanted to see if she'd lie about it. Pretend she had a late meeting or lost track of time at some rooftop wine bar. But she didn't even bother with excuses. She walked in at 6:43 a.m. Hair pulled back. Lips wiped clean. No walk of shame. Just quiet confidence, like someone returning from yoga. I was already in the kitchen when she walked in, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile. She looked at me, then at the mug, and gave the smallest smile. The same kind she gave me when I forgot to fold the laundry right. Just enough to say, "You're harmless." Then, as if nothing had happened, she said, "You didn't sleep." I didn't answer. I took a slow sip. I think I wanted to see if the steam could burn away the words she'd said in that video. Milo doesn't ask questions. He just makes tea. She was halfway to the bedroom before she paused and said, "We should talk tonight." And just like that, she was gone. Not a trace of guilt in her voice. Not even fake remorse. Just a schedule. I stood there for a long time, still holding the mug. And then I did something weird. Something I didn't understand until hours later. I took the mug, still warm, still full, and placed it right in the center of the dining table. Not carelessly. Deliberately. I aligned it with the grain in the wood. Centered it under the chandelier. Then I went into the living room and sat on the couch. That's where I stayed. All day. Didn't go to work. Didn't answer my phone. Just sat there, eyes on that cup of tea, like it was some sort of monument. And the more I stared, the more something began to shift. It wasn't rage. Not yet. Rage is hot and loud. This was something else. Something colder. Like I was watching my life from outside my body, and all I could think was, how many times did I hand her comfort while she was handing someone else her truth? At 7:08 p.m., she came home again. Shopping bag in one hand, keys in the other. She looked tired. Or maybe bored. Hard to tell. She saw me on the couch and gave a quick, "Hey." Then she noticed the tea. She stopped. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Just looked at her and said, "That's yours. Thought you might want some." She gave a short laugh, but it didn't sound real. "You okay?" That was the first time all day I actually smiled. "No, but you will be," I said. Eventually. She didn't respond. Just stared at me like I was speaking a different language. Then she glanced at the tea again, and I swear, for the first time in months, I saw uncertainty on her face. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. Because I realized something in that moment. She hadn't just cheated on a man. She'd underestimated him. And that's a different kind of mistake. That night, after she went to sleep, I opened a blank notebook and started writing. Not a letter. Not a goodbye. A list. Just a single line across the top. Things I ignored. It started small. That missing charger she insisted she never took. The extra glass in the sink when I came home from visiting my brother. Her sudden obsession with locking the bathroom door. At the time, I chalked it up to stress, convenience, privacy. But now it was like someone had adjusted the contrast on every memory. I could see all the details I hadn't wanted to admit were there. By the time I hit the 50th item, my hands were shaking. And yet I felt calm. More focused than I'd been in years. There's something liberating about letting go of the version of yourself that was built to please. Milo 1:0, the soft guy who said yes, who smoothed things over, who let her take the bigger slice because she's had a rough week. That Milo was gone. Around 2 a.m., I walked quietly into our bedroom. She was asleep, one leg thrown over the blanket, lips slightly parted, her phone charging on the nightstand. That phone used to be something sacred, private, off-limits. Now it might as well have been a portal. I picked it up. No passcode. She never thought I'd look. She wasn't hiding the messages anymore. She didn't need to. There was a chat with him. Of course. But what hit me harder was what came next. A name I didn't expect. Hollis. A name I hadn't heard in years. Hollis used to be her ex. The kind she said messed her up, the toxic one. The guy who played guitar, lied often, and made her question everything. She'd told me he was the reason she knew she needed someone stable. Me. So why was she texting him? Why had she sent him a photo of her in the same blue dress she wore on our anniversary? Felt like you'd appreciate this more than anyone. The message read. That was sent 3 weeks ago. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding her phone in my hands, trying to steady my breathing. One affair was brutal. 2. That was war. Except I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to break dishes or make dramatic exits. I wanted to understand. Not for her. For me. Because clearly, I had built my life on a person I never really knew. And now that the facade was crumbling, I needed to see what was underneath. How far the rot went. How much of me had been real, and how much was just set dressing for her performance. I placed the phone back exactly where I found it. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I added another name to the notebook. Hollis. Then I circled it twice. And next to it, I wrote one question. What if she never stopped auditioning? The next morning, she acted like everything was fine. She made herself a smoothie, scrolled through her phone, and said something about needing to drop by the dry cleaner. I nodded, still half in the kitchen, watching her like someone watching a magician up close, trying to spot the wires. Now that I knew about Hollis, now that I knew about both of them, I couldn't stop replaying her past words in my head, trying to find the lies I'd missed the first time. Every laugh, every compliment, every time she said, "You're the only one who really knows me," it all felt poisoned. She left around 9:30. As soon as the door closed behind her, I moved fast. Not out of panic, out of clarity. There was a second phone. I'd noticed it once months ago when she came back from a conference and forgot to zip her purse all the way. I saw the corner of a phone that didn't have a case. She told me it was a temporary work phone for a client project. I never saw it again, but I remembered. And Francis was a creature of habit, which meant the hiding spots didn't change often, they just rotated. It took me less than 10 minutes to find it. Behind the sewing kit she never used, inside the box labeled winter scarves. Locked, of course, but not in a sophisticated way. I tried 4 numbers, her old college apartment, and just like that, I was inside. There were 2 active threads. One was Hollis. The other was a number with no name, just a string of emojis. That one turned my stomach in a way I didn't expect. The messages weren't raunchy. They were worse. Romantic. Deep. Thoughtful. She was building another version of herself for this guy. Sharing poetry. Voice notes. Telling him about dreams she never told me. Talking about her future. The word ours appeared more than once. The voice notes were the hardest, because in them, she sounded free. Young. The way she used to sound with me. There was a moment in one of them where she laughed and whispered, "He still doesn't know. I think he'll just keep making me tea until I leave." I powered the phone off. Not because I couldn't take more, but because I had enough. Enough to understand what she'd been doing. Enough to know I had never been the main character in my own marriage. I was the cushion, the placeholder, the guy you keep when the others fall through. But what she didn't realize, what none of them did, was that I wasn't staying quiet out of weakness anymore. I was studying, watching, learning. She had turned our life into a play, reciting lines with 3 different lovers. But she forgot something important. Eventually, the audience stops clapping. And sometimes, they bring the curtain down early. The funny thing about control is how invisible it is when you never had it. I used to think being quiet meant being overlooked. That listening instead of talking meant weakness. But silence, real silence, is terrifying when it's intentional. Especially to people who are used to getting away with everything because they assume you'll never make noise. The first move I made wasn't explosive. It was small, boring even. I started by backing everything up, both phones. I didn't know if I'd ever need it, but something told me I should keep records. Not for blackmail, not for a courtroom, just to make sure my version of this story didn't get rewritten after she left. I didn't touch her or speak about it. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't question her new cologne or her extra-long errands. I became background again, but this time by choice. And it worked. 3 days passed, and she got sloppy. Comfortable. She laughed more, texted more, started taking calls in the open again. She thought I had either accepted it or somehow didn't know. Either way, she saw me as a non-threat. A man deflated. A man she could step over on her way out. She even asked me to help her pick out a new suitcase for a work retreat. I ordered the nicest one I could find, wrapped it in a bow, left it on the bed with a note that just said, "Wherever you're going, I hope it's worth it." She smiled when she saw it. Smiled like I was the most supportive husband in the world. But that same night, I sent an email. It wasn't to her, or to him, or to Hollis. It was to someone who had been part of this longer than I'd realized. Elena, her closest friend, maid of honor at our wedding. The one who always smiled too wide when she saw us kiss. The one who once told me, in passing, "I don't think Francis deserves someone like you." At the time, I thought it was meant as a compliment. Now, I wasn't so sure. So I sent her a message, short, direct, honest. "Tell me what you know. You owe me at least that." She replied within 20 minutes. And what she told me, it changed everything I thought I knew about this marriage. Not just the infidelity, not just the lies, but the plan. Because apparently, Francis wasn't just preparing to leave. She was preparing to rewrite everything we built into a version where I was the problem. And in her version, she was the victim. Elena's message was short, but it gutted me. She didn't waste time with apologies or sympathy. She just sent me a screenshot, a PDF attachment Francis had emailed her 2 weeks ago. The file was called statement_draft_final. I stared at the name for a long time before opening it. Something about that word, final, gave me a cold feeling in my teeth. You know that sensation when you're about to read something you can't unread? That's exactly what it was. Inside the document was a carefully worded narrative. 4 paragraphs. Polished. Emotionally manipulative. It read like a public confession, the kind people post when they want to come clean without taking any real responsibility. It painted her as the brave one. The woman who tried to make her marriage work with a man who was, quote, unemotionally available, detached, and increasingly controlling. Controlling. She called me controlling. This from the woman who once logged into my email just to check if I was being honest about a meeting. The woman who would get cold for days if I didn't word a compliment the exact right way. The woman who'd told me what clothes made me look less anxious. And now she was drafting a version of our story where she was trapped. That's when I realized she wasn't planning to leave quietly. She was preparing her exit strategy. One where she looked like the survivor. One where anyone who'd known us, our friends, our coworkers, our families, would believe she had no choice but to walk away from the emotional fog of being with me. She even referenced my therapist in it. He refuses to talk about anything real in therapy, she wrote. It's like I'm married to a ghost with a pulse. That was the moment I felt something inside me flip. Not explode. Flip. Like a switch being turned off. Whatever thread had still connected me to the idea of saving us, it was gone. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was rewriting me. And the worst part? She was good at it. Her words were calm, strategic, full of that wounded maturity tone that people fall for online. I could already imagine the comments. So sorry you went through this, Queen. You did what you had to do. Men like that never change. She knew exactly what she was doing. And now so did I. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to let her finish her play. Let her write the final act. And then I'd hand her the real ending. Because if she wanted a performance, I was finally ready to step on stage. I didn't wait long. 3 days after reading Francis's draft, I invited her to dinner. At home. Nothing fancy. I made her favorite, lemon pepper salmon, wild rice, roasted asparagus. Lit candles. Played that playlist she once said made her feel nostalgic and warm. I wanted everything to feel normal, comfortable, safe, the way she liked it. She sat down smiling, even complimented the wine. For a second, if someone had walked in, they would have thought we were fine. That this was just a Thursday evening between 2 people in love. But I knew better. I waited until she took her first bite. Then I placed my phone on the table, face up, and hit play. Her voice filled the room. Not her real-time voice, her recorded voice. One of the voice notes she'd sent to the mystery man. The one where she laughed about how clueless I was. About the tea. About the fact that I wouldn't figure it out until she was already gone. Her fork froze midair. She didn't say anything. Just stared at the screen like it had betrayed her. I let the message finish. Then I played the next one. The one where she joked about me being the softest landing spot before she moved on to a real life. She set her fork down. Milo, she said quietly. Where did you get? I've seen everything. I cut her off. The second phone. The messages. The calendar. The photo you sent Hollis in the dress I bought you. Silence. Also, I added, sipping my wine, I read your little final statement. Her face went pale. Not embarrassed. Not apologetic. Just exposed. I stood up, reached into the drawer behind me, and pulled out an envelope. I placed it on the table beside her plate. Inside was a signed lease. Not for me. For her. I had already spoken to the landlord. Paid the deposit. Moved most of her things while she was working late. I found you a place, I said calmly. Close to downtown. Month to month. No strings. I even paid for the first 2 months so you don't have to worry about it while you're adjusting to your real life. She blinked. You're kicking me out? I shrugged. I'm giving you what you wanted. Freedom. Adventure. Something with sharper edges. You said I never challenged you, right? I smiled. Well, surprise. She didn't respond right away. Just stared at me like she didn't recognize the man across the table. And maybe she didn't. Because I wasn't the man who begged. I wasn't the man who folded anymore. I was the man who listened, who watched, who waited, and then moved. The next morning, she packed her things. No big blow-up. No breakdown. Just quiet, awkward movements like she was scared to breathe too loudly. As she walked to the door, she turned back and said, "You were always too good for me." I didn't say anything. She left. 2 weeks later, I learned she'd tried to move in with the other guy. He ghosted her. Apparently, he liked the version of her that was stolen, not the one who stood there with baggage and no fallback plan. 3 months after that, Hollis blocked her on everything. One of our mutual friends said she was couch hopping, trying to find a way to spin her story again. But I didn't care. I was already gone. I started over. I went back to therapy, this time for me. I adopted a dog. I began painting again, not for distraction, but because I finally had space in my life that wasn't full of lies. And the first piece I finished? It was called The Teacup. I sold it at a gallery downtown. To a stranger who said, "There's something peaceful about it, but also powerful." And I just smiled and said, "Yeah, that's the idea."